term dark patterns refers to online interface design and choice architectures that aim to manipulate the decisions of users by making them act in ways that are against their own self-interest. They can display static features, which are common to all users and easily observable, but increasingly dark patterns have become more personalized and dynamic based on the collection of personal user data. Examples can include the Roach-Motel dark pattern, which makes it very easy to subscribe to services, but very difficult to unsubscribe. Another example would be creating false hierarchies when accepting cookies on websites. Websites make the accept cookies button stand out and making the users potentially share more personal data than they initially intended to. Essentially, dark patterns privilege and amplify the interests of online platforms at the expense of the fundamental rights and the autonomy of individuals to make free and informed decisions. A study conducted by the European Commission in 2022 showed that of the favorite platforms of EU consumers, 97% of them deployed at least one dark pattern. So far, EU law addressed dark patterns chiefly through data and consumer protection law. In particular, the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, and the UCPD, the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, have played prominent roles in the regulation, although neither of them expressly mentions dark patterns. Today, these laws are complemented by Article 25 of the Digital Services Act, which poses a general prohibition of dark patterns. According to Article 25, online platforms are prohibited from designing, organizing, or operating online interfaces in a way that manipulates or deceives their users, or in a way that materially distorts or impairs their decision-making when it comes to transactional decisions. However, the DSA does not apply to all practices already covered by the UCPD or the GDPR, begging the question how exactly Article 25 should be implemented.
Since our research question was how Article 25 should be implemented, we highlighted 4 issues. The first one looks at the terms of Article 25 itself, and we highlight that there are some legal definitions and legal terms within the article that are still unclear. The second issue zooms out of Article 25, and we explored how this prohibition interacts with some pre-existing prohibitions on dark patterns, most notably the GDPR and the UCPD. And the third issue was actually how to operationalize the enforcement of this provision. Finally, because the policy objective behind this prohibition is to reduce the prevalence of dark patterns, we noted that there are other articles within the Digital Services Act that can be used to this effect. So therefore, we explored how the DSA as a whole can be harnessed as a sort of toolbox. In line with our 4 issues, we also made 4 recommendations. The first one is to clarify the legal definitions. So when Article 25 prohibits online interface designs that manipulate users, what interface is it referring to? In the sense that, does it only cover static dark patterns, or does it extend to more dynamic practices? We argue that dynamic dark patterns are best addressed through the GDPR. Secondly, a dark pattern is prohibited when it has the effect of manipulating a user. But does this effect need to be actual, or does a potential effect suffice? We argue that a potential effect should be enough. Furthermore, we posit that when we evaluate the likelihood of a dark pattern manipulating a user, we should take into account the digital vulnerability of users, so the asymmetry between users and the architects of the online interface. Our second area for recommendations is to clarify the legal scope of Article 25, in particular how it interrelates with the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, which is the most complicated relationship in that sense. We also posit that there is a need to clarify the enforcement of Article 25 DSA. And this is also related to how difficult it is to distinguish the scopes between the DSA and the UCPD. Therefore, in particular, we recommend that the Commission creates some sort of cooperation mechanisms between the national authorities that will implement the DSA and the national authorities for consumer protection to ensure that dark patterns are properly covered. Our final recommendation looks at the DSA toolbox, as we mentioned before, and we say that actually the European Commission should harness the other provisions in the DSA that can be used to tackle dark patterns.